Hello, I'm Nurbek Zavitakhunov. You're watching news from Kazakhstan. Vladislav Chelach may not be the only survivor of the terrible tragedy in Arkan border outpost. This version of events is becoming more and more plausible. Earlier, Gulzhan.org reported about 3 border guards who may have survived. Denis Ray, Meirkhan Imenov, and Rustam Akalbayev were on the list of those who served at the frontier. However, their deaths were not officially confirmed. The 3 bodies found at the outpost are still unidentified. Moreover, Gulzhan.org writes Akalbekov allegedly returned home and is currently hiding with his relatives.
One of the border guards of Arkan outpost is probably still alive, as reported by the journalists of internet portal Gulzhan.org, citing their own sources. According to the version of Gulzhan.org, the survivor Rustem Akalbayev presumably has returned home and is currently concealed as a fugitive by his family, not to repeat the fate of Vladislav Chelach. Previously, Astana TV channel reported that Rustem Akalbayev was seen by several people, but the information was later shushed. His family kept silent, unlike the other 2. According to the available data, Rustem was at home for quite some time, but it is possible that by now he has changed the location. It will be impossible to make Rustem a witness in the Chelach's case. If he is alive, he is on the run from the National Security Committee and Interior Ministry because he saw who committed the murder and is afraid otherwise he would have spoken up a long time ago about Chelach committing the massacre. The only thing that his family can do now is record Rustem's account and send the video to different people, newspapers and TV channels. This way they will at least provide some security to their children. Rustem Akalbayev is a resident of Usharal, which is not too far from the Arkan outpost where 14 border guards and a huntsman were killed 2 months ago. According to the version of Gulzhan.org, Rustem is concealed by his family in his hometown. This version became known to the family of Vladislav Chelach, suspected in the mass murder. I've heard about it a million times, but I don't know if it's true. How is this going to affect the case? This will be another omission on behalf of supervisory authorities and military department. According to human rights defender Evgeny Zhovtis, there are much more questions than answers to this case. How many body parts were found, how many haven't been identified yet, and what's the status of forensic examination, which is rumored to be held by the German experts. Once the facts are proved and we have the photograph of this man, if he is indeed alive and hiding, it is in his best interest to go public, which is the only guarantee of his safety. Only then we will be able to question the official version of this case. This is Rustem Akalbayev's page on mail.ru social network. The last time he logged on was March 25th, right when he visited his hometown Usharal. The border guards on Arkan were killed on May 27th or 28th. Dear Usharal, it is so great to be back in my hometown. Moreover, the sources of the website J have suggested that at least 3 border guards of Arkan could have escaped the massacre and stayed alive. The authorities haven't responded to this version yet. We have no information until the forensic examination is completed, therefore I have no comments.
The border guards' relatives are tired of waiting for an end to examinations of fallen soldiers' remains. For more than 2 months, their families have been kept in the dark, seemingly on purpose. According to Denis Ray's relatives, who was drafted from Pavlodar region, no one except for journalists maintained communication with them.
Only the military prosecution was able to inform Tatiana Ray that it is hard to identify the remains of her son Denis Ray. Supposedly, a metal cupboard fell on Denis and the bones turned into ashes after the fire. Relatives of the killed still hope that their loved ones are not among those 3 unidentified bodies. They believe that the lead of Gulzhan.org website that claims that 3 soldiers could have survived the massacre is true. The expert evaluation of bodies from Arkan, which is being conducted in Germany, is not finished yet. If they are not disclosing information, it is quite possible there might be some other lead. It took 10 days for the test in Astana, but it is taking more than 15 days for the Germans to make it.
Law enforcement authorities filed a criminal case on charges of arson of the honorary consulate of Syria in Kazakhstan on July 9th. As reported by Gulzhan.org, the building was under surveillance and unidentified individuals were able to set fire to the consul's residence in under 2 hours. The room where official talks and meetings were held was burnt down. There were no casualties since the staff was out of office at the time. The website writes the Syrian official in Kazakhstan, Samir Derech, is frightened. Meanwhile, in Damascus, an explosion on July 18th killed Syrian Defense Minister Daoud Rashka and heavily wounded Interior Minister Mohammed Ashar. President Bashar Assad's son-in-law, Asef Shaukaf, was also wounded and, according to some sources, died in hospital. The doors are locked. There is no one in the office. Now it is clear that we were under surveillance because as soon as the staff left, the assailants entered the premise and set everything on fire. Upstairs, there was a room for meetings in Mr. Dirich's office. Some valuables were there. A TV set and other things that could be stolen were downstairs, but nothing was touched. They just set it on fire, and that's it. Of course, all of us are frightened, but we don't even know who might have done that. Most likely, this is just a global trend of chaos. It is necessary to find out who is benefiting from destroying Damascus, Aleppo, and other Syrian cities with rich history. The Kazakhstan Police Department's management ranks will be short of 200 people. As a result of the second phase of the unscheduled certification process, 130 law enforcement officers are recommended for release from their posts, 70 for dismissal from the agency, and only 20 people are recommended for promotion. It was reported on Wednesday at a weekly Ministry of Internal Affairs briefing.
The exact number of sacked heads and deputies is not yet known. In some of the regions, policemen are still passing the tests. The head of the road police of Almaty, Arman Sarbasov, ended up on the sack list. As he explained to some media, he passed all the tests excellently, but his age is preventing him to continue. The age limit for a colonel is 53 years. He already wrote an appeal for dismissal. Moreover, the head of anti-extremism department of Almaty region was lowered in position. However, the Ministry of Internal Affairs sees no connection with the explosion in Tausamal village, where on July 11th, 8 people died. Kairat Aksitov just failed the attestation, informed the representative of the agency. The chief criminal expert and anti-drug trafficking department head of Almaty will also be lowered in rank. They all can appeal to court if they disagree with the results of the attestation committee. However, there were no precedents. Up until now, no one showed interest to appeal to court. Commission is working as this is an integrated attestation, so all the issues are being evaluated. So not a single test taker expressed a wish to appeal the decisions in court.
The activist Vadim Kuramshin intends to go on a hunger strike inside the detention ward. He has been under arrest for more than 6 months, while the magistrates are delaying the process. According to the lawyer, it has taken a month and a half for the psychological and linguistic expertise to arrive from Astana in order to resume the process. At the Kuramshin's defense committee, it was also reported that the arrested sent his demands to the specialized interregional Jambul Region Criminal Court Judge Samal Tolisbay. Vadim Kuramshin intends to protest against the deliberate protraction of the trial, as well as the violation of his right for a jury. The human rights defender claims that court hearings revealed misconduct of state officials, which led to Vadim Kuramshin ending up on the dock. Vadim Kuramshin's attorney, Razia Nurmasheva, opposes her client's intention to go on a hunger strike, even though Kuramshin's health conditions allow this desperate measure. At the same time, the attorney claims that the legal process might be resumed this week. Kuramshin was arrested on January 23rd on suspicion of extortion of property from the member of the prosecution in his office. According to the public committee, Vadim Kuramshin pleaded not guilty. If the court convicts him, Kuramshin might get a prison term of 12 years of special regime without parole. The appeals on the instigation of a criminal case of Husainov, Kwanishbekov, Aliyev, the criminal cases were not yet instigated against them, due to the fact that Kazakhstan joined and ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption, and by ignoring this crime, Kazakhstan shows tolerance towards this obvious crime. The daughter of Roza Tulitaeva, who was sentenced to 7 years in prison for organizing and participating in mass riots in Zhanaozen, Aliya, visited the Aktau branch of Alliance Bank on Thursday. She sought legal counsel from the famous among oil workers human rights activist Aysel Nurgazieva.
I was always told that I'm going to sell it. I was never able to talk to the head of the bank. They would pass the messages through the bank members. Today they again talked about the action, but we were always refused. Each time they would come up with different reasons. To cut the long story short, they just rebuffed us. Just now I visited Nuratan Session. The head of the bank again lied during the meeting in front of high-ranking officials, claiming that the bank always wanted to help us, that they always welcomed us, but supposedly were refused and were avoiding a meeting with them. I assure you, nothing of that happened. This is just the way they want to exonerate themselves. On Wednesday, it was revealed that the Alliance Bank is planning to evict the children of Roza Tulitaeva from their only housing, two-room apartment in Zhanaozen. The premise was purchased on loan by Roza Tulitaeva while she was working as Ozenmunaygas employee several years ago. According to Alia, before the sacking, her mother always and timely paid the interest, and the financial institution had no claims. The problem with the bank emerged after the court verdict. At the moment, no one is residing in the apartment. Relatives took all 4 children. Alia claims that she tried to resolve the issue with the apartment on numerous occasions on her own. However, all the documents indicate that Roza Tulitaeva is the owner with all the rights. The bank officials talked to Alia and asked her to bring the copy of the court verdict and promised to consider their issue. Representative of the Alliance Bank Rustam Sharipov was not able to explain what will be exactly proposed to Tulitaevas under such circumstances. At the moment, the bank is preparing an official response in regard to the situation of Tulitaeva's family. Any appeal will be revised. If the borrower is convicted, I'm telling you once more, please attach the notarized copy of the verdict, write an appeal. The bank will evaluate it according to the charter, and penalty interest might not be imposed. For instance, if you would like to get the restructuring, everything will be evaluated by the authorized body.
The wife of opposition leader Vladimir Kozlov, Aliya Turuzbekova, says her husband was transferred to a solitary cell in the Aktau jail that not only violates international but Kazakhstan standards as well. After the release of Balat Atabayev and Janbolat Mamai, the management in Aktau pretrial detention center was replaced, and new leadership toughened the detention conditions for Kozlov. Aliya Turuzbekova met with her husband on Friday, July 13th. During a short date, she was able to see on the hands and face of Vladimir Kozlov the signs of multiple insect bites. It was revealed later that Kozlov shared some time in the cell with insects and rats, and without water. When Aliya made this information public, Kozlov was transferred to another cell with better conditions. However, according to Aliya Turuzbekova, Kozlov's cell still has no chair and table. He writes his notes on the lap. Concerning the criminal case, the investigative actions were completed and defendants and attorneys are familiarizing with case materials. Aliya claims that Vladimir Kozlov needs decent conditions to prepare for the trial. He lost weight and was covered in bites. His hands, face. When I asked him what happened, he said that he was transferred to another small, stuffy cell with insects and rats. I don't think that it was the cell for tortures, but it is definitely a place for humiliation of the person whose guilt was not yet proven.
It is hot. We're splashing each other and the rag at the door with bottled water. And it's just April. On Monday, I'll try to convince the leadership of the detention center to give us a fan and a brighter bulb with less power consumption. We don't have our freedoms here, but not dignity of feeling like human beings. No one sentenced us to losing our vision, feeling the heat in the cell, or not having a toilet and water around, etc. This kind of prison conditions were considered as torture by the coalition of NGOs of Kazakhstan. They say that this way of treating the prisoners degrades the human dignity and contravenes to international standards. As reported by Radio Azatik, the officials of Aktau NSC pretrial detention center refute the information on hygiene and state that the prison cells are regularly handled by sanitary services. When Vladimir Kozlov was brought to Aktau pretrial detention center, members of the Public Observers Commission visited him and confirmed that he is detained in normal conditions. Human rights defender Yevgeny Zhovtis shared the bitter experience of doing time in a colony settlement. According to him, virtually all pretrial detention facilities of Kazakhstan have such unsanitary conditions. Human rights activist says that the conditions in prison largely depend on the year it was built. Aside from the detention center number 18, which is located in Almaty region, all other detention facilities are very old. For instance, the prison in Semipalatinsk has been there since Catherine the Great, so you can imagine the conditions: the huge walls, basement, and no hot water.
Journalist and social activist Janbolat Mamai has once again announced a split in the National Social Democratic Party Azad, and even named members of the organization who cooperate with authorities. Mamai says Jarmakhan Tuyakbay, Petr Svoik, and Baltash Tursunbayev work for Akorda and provoke a split in the party on purpose. The journalist refers to the fact that Tuyakbay, Abilov, and Kosanov carry out activities separately from one another and even occupy different offices.
I know for sure that Jarmakhan Tuyakbay is planted, and he's not a true opposition member. According to my sources, he met Ahmedjan Yesimov and obtained financial resources from him. Most importantly, he receives instructions from the presidential administration. Petr Svoik also cooperates with the government. He has been with them for a long time, and everyone knows it. I'll say it straight, Mama is always involved in some intrigues and stories that most often have unpleasant consequences. He'd better think about himself and his future, rather than make those ambiguous accusations.
The Ust-Kamenogorsk Appellate Court satisfied Director Kazakhstan Bikmanov's claim towards the chief editor of the local newspaper Flash, Denis Danilevsky. The journalist wrote an article about Mustafa Shokai, where he called the politician a Nazi accomplice. The court ordered Danilevsky to pay the author of the documentary called By the Roads of Mustafa Shokai moral compensation in the amount of $700.
Mustafa Shokai has nothing to do with the Turkestan Legion. Moreover, comparing him with Nazis, fascists or General Vlasov is disgraceful. That is why the truth is on my side and that is why I won. To win this case, Bikmanov hired an attorney. The filmmaker gave himself a trouble to collect all inquiries from the General Prosecutor Office. Bikmanov also found the relatives of Mustafa Shokai who gave him a power of attorney to defend the honor of their ancestor in court. The court's decision will take effect after 15 days. Danilevsky intends to lodge an appeal to the Constitutional Court within this period. However, he doesn't believe in the positive outcome of his case. The court ruled that it is a violation to express critical views about historical figures. Political scientist Aidos Sarem stayed on the pulse of the issue with Shokai. According to Sarem, it is a typical interpretation of the history in the post-Soviet zone. He explained that during 20 years of independence, Kazakhstan created a new history, which is different from Russia's history. I believe the court's decision was fully legitimate and historically fair. Mustafa Shokai never pledged allegiance to USSR since he was ideologically against the Soviet authority. During his migration, he at least tried to alleviate the plight of the Soviet prisoners of war, including Kazakhstan Turks, Muslims sent to concentration camps. Even his alleged connection to Turkestan Legion does not minimize his historical significance.
Only a month since the publication of the President's article, 20 Steps Towards a Society of Universal Labor, devoted to Kazakhstan's social modernization, the capital branch of the ruling party developed a plan for its promotion. On Thursday, at an extended meeting in Astana, party workers announced that they became the flagship of the movement in support of the national leader's speech.
Just like in the old days, following the traditions of Soviet Communist Party's meetings, the President decree was met with universal approval. The young adults made stirring speeches from the stand calling to work for the good of the country and praising the nation's leader. The first deputy chairman of Nuratan Astana branch is certain that, quote, thousands of Astana residents are once again proud for the President's wisdom in defining the country's development vectors, end of quote. The word revolution that is frowned upon the higher officials turned out to be a useful notion if applied correctly and in the requested sphere. The President has made it clear that Kazakhstan does not need revolution in politics. However, a revolution in economy, science and social modernization is a vital thing. Kazakhstan needs to find an optimum balance between sustaining economic success and providing public benefits. If the government can do it, then young families need to build their own houses. It is not good to be always living at the state expense, says Marjan Abdimajitova. She's the member of an organization that has a pompous Soviet-style name. No sooner had Kazakhstan citizens read the president's speech in the newspaper, where he said that the unemployment is high among young adults, than a coalition of universal labor was created the very next day. The modern world calls for new ways and approaches regarding the issues of propaganda, prudence, hard work and healthy lifestyle. A creative approach should be applied here. Time has come to launch projects such as anti-laziness and labor boost. In fact, all projects that were so emotionally described by party members turned out to be nothing more than regular flash mobs. They are organized to demonstrate the advantages of factory jobs. It is not yet known how those advantages will be shown. Probably the ideas will surface after organizers watch the Soviet movies. This is not too distant history. Most of the speakers referred to Soviet movies in their speeches. They used many quotes of celebrities and of the nation's leader. One of the speakers, emphasizing how important the labor is, told a parable about ancient Greek gods who tried to hide happiness from the people. Fairy tales will remain fairy tales in reality. However, Nuratan party members have already proposed to organize party control.
Pensioners Aizbergenovs from Uralsk, despite a $30 fine, decided to organize another protest action on Wednesday. They picketed the building of the regional prosecutor's office with a sign saying, "Prosecutor Zhadulgasov, put the money where your mouth is, and who stepped on your tail?" They stood near the building for over half an hour. Members of the prosecution office invited the retired couple for a talk, but noted that they have no powers to resolve their issue and that Aizbergenovs have to appeal to the court.
This is the 8th protest action organized by the Uralsk retirees, who even appealed to the president of Kazakhstan. Their problem involves the two-story cafe built in 2007 next to their house by the businessman Sankubayev. When the entrepreneur decided to legalize the building, the fire department did not approve the structure due to dangerous proximity to the house of the retired couple. Later, the cafe owner filed a lawsuit against senior citizens requesting to demolish part of their house, and the court granted his claim. Ever since, the retired couple has been organizing protest actions to find justice. They called us to let off the steam. They're not competent to solve this issue, therefore they refer to the court. Yet if the court does not address their issue, then who does? The prosecutor's office and the appellate court cannot help them either. What else are they supposed to do?
Civil proceedings against the anti-TB clinic staff were initiated in Pavlodar at the request of the 3-year-old Mark Frollov's mother. She intends to claim $160,000 for the death of her child from medical workers.
The little boy died of heart failure caused by cleansing enema. The criminal case was initiated following his death. The boy's attending medical physician and a nurse who administered an enema were found guilty but were granted an amnesty. Now Mark's parents want to receive a moral compensation from the hospital and regional healthcare administration. The medical officials have partially admitted their fault, however asked for the compensation amount to be decreased up to $5,000 to $10,000. They say that the hospital and regional healthcare administration depends solely on the state budget and therefore do not have the money requested by the complainant. However, the parents of the late boy are holding their ground. Material damage was inflicted on my client, however, it is insignificant. The moral damage is of course the hardest and it cannot be compensated by money or anything else. They blamed the mother during one of the trials that she was after the money. I told them, give the mother her child back and no one will be asking for anything from you.
In other medical news, the chief sanitary doctor of the country on Wednesday criticized menus at Kazakh celebrations. According to Jandarбек Bekshin, mass events with over 300 or even more guests are an ideal source of food poisoning and infectious diseases.
The main cause of food poisoning lies in the storage conditions and cooking methods. The head of the Sanitary and Epidemiological Inspection Authority notes that most of the mass food poisoning cases that took place in South Kazakhstan and Karaganda regions are connected to large amounts of perishable goods. In these regions, the meal is prepared a day before the special occasion and stored not in the refrigerator but under 40 degrees heat. To recall, the case of mass food poisoning was registered in Kazgur district of South Kazakhstan region in May. In this district, 57 people had to be hospitalized after the wedding. The journalists were also informed about the main enemy of all banquets. According to Bekshin, the mayonnaise is among those enemies which include meat jelly, boiled sausages, pastry with cream, and especially the meat essential to the Kazakh banquet. Sanitary and Epidemiological Inspection Authority recommends, if not to exclude, but at least to minimize all these exquisite dishes from nutrition during the summertime. People should minimize the consumption of mayonnaise. The meals should be dressed with mayonnaise only an hour before it is offered. We all know that when people are invited, for example, to come at 5 p.m., they usually come at 10 p.m. People need to work on their late coming habits. We need to cultivate a new habit.
Serik Sapiyev was misunderstood by journalists. One of the most renowned Kazakhstan boxers who will represent the country at the upcoming London Olympics is actually satisfied with the Kazakh national team uniform. His criticism was over size only and not the design.
The reporters themselves have stayed up this fuss. I didn't mean to talk bad about this athletic uniform. I just wasn't the right size. Of course, later on everything was taken care and they replaced those uniforms. 2 weeks earlier, Sapiyev made a statement that the quality of Olympic uniform is not the best and it is made of rather mediocre material. However, before the departure, the famous athlete seemed to be in a better mood. Perhaps this has to do with the promise given to the Ministry of Defense on Wednesday. The agency gathered the Olympic soldier athletes and promised additional rewards to the winners. The total of 26 soldier athletes represent Kazakhstan in London who has been training under the Ministry of Defense. On Wednesday, it was revealed that 116 instead of previously announced 115 athletes from Kazakhstan will participate in the Olympics, which starts on July 27. The last license for the national team was won by the master of race walking, Vitaly Anichkin.
Finally, the national teams are currently arriving in London from all over the world as the Olympic Games are about to start. London streets are jammed and airports packed with flights arriving almost every minute. Kazakhstan rowers arrived in England, but on the way lost their boat due to a mistake of the Turkish airline company. They were forced to buy a new one. Meanwhile, 250 Kazakh fans are getting ready to hit the road and arrive in the UK. According to the official transportation partner's information, the fans are preparing for the trip quite thoroughly, almost the same way as the athletes themselves. Find out how next.
Rahimjan Beyseev is one of the lucky ones. Today he received the official uniform of the Kazakhstan Olympic Team's fan in the office of the travel company. The Almaty resident will fly to London on July 27th to witness one of the spectacular events of the year, the Olympic Games. His goal is to see the performance of his countrymen in specific sports. Of course, it hit my pocket pretty bad, but it's worth it to see the event and show support for Kazakhstan athletes. I'm a big fan of our wrestling team since I was a wrestler too. Before I used to dream about participating in the Olympic Games, but now I can at least witness it. Just a week ago, the head of the fans' headquarters mentioned to the press that only 250 VIP individuals will be able to cover the cost of expensive tickets and accommodation in England. It is very good that they will be there because we must show our support for our athletes at the event. Sport is a very unpredictable field where it might be necessary to have some powerful officials nearby because anything may happen there. The authority of these officials may offer the necessary support. They will be there for a day or two since they can't leave their offices for long. One of the official partners of fans' headquarters, the Komplekt Service travel company, is providing the travel tickets for the fans. The head of the travel company rushed to stand up for the elected officials. Don't be misled, not a single MP is a part of the fan group. There is a false report circulating in the press. There is no MP in our group. Ablayhan Sarsimbayev does confess that the trip is not a cheap one. There are people who are ready to pay $3,000 just to attend the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. On the other hand, some people chose more expensive packages for $13,000 to attend several contests during the week. According to Rima Tajabayeva, the fans' headquarters will be slightly supported by the Samruk-Kazana National Fund, which will provide sport gear and gifts with national symbols. Fellow countrymen who live abroad are also expected to show support at the event. Anyone who is ready to chant "Forward Kazakhstan" will be welcomed at the national fans section. According to preliminary reports, the president Nursultan Nazarbayev also plans to visit the Olympic Games to show his support for Kazakhstan athletes.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.